All right, good morning, and we're going to talk a little bit about some crazy hyperbole today. But before that, just a couple of channel updates. So, haven't been making as many videos this week. Also, very difficult to get stuff uploaded and published on BitChute for whatever reason, and I've sent an email to them. So, if you're on BitChute and you're wondering where the videos are, I'm doing the best I can. Other things. So I'm working on a story that's probably the next major research investigation that I've done. There are going to be 3 parts to it, probably. But the real question is when and how I'm going to publish it. And I'm really thinking about it. So there's a lot to do, and that's really more of a concern to me than necessarily any of the projects that I still have going on with the YouTube channel, which, by the way, is not doing very well, which I'll never sugarcoat. So, things that are going on today that are pretty crazy. All of these, ironically, they have to do with the Democrats and either the Holocaust and the border or racism or Iran or whatever. It is almost unbelievable how many contradictory opinions you can have within one party. And I say contradictory because I think if people want to be consistent and say things that are very controversial, but they're still consistent, I have absolutely no problem with it. I would say that in many ways, okay, and you guys can hate me or despise me for it. In many ways, my way of thinking is the real liberal thinking, and it doesn't have anything to do with whether I'm a conservative or a social liberal or any of that crap, or libertarian. I think people should be able to say what they mean, and if they say what they mean, people will probably accept their or respect them a little better. But in politics, it just isn't that way, because I think people are driven more by pride and by a desire to appear as if they care. So here is Ocasio-Cortez, again, talking about a fascist presidency running concentration camps on the southern border. So we're going to hear from her, and then maybe see some of the crazy crap that is being generated from that.
The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border, and that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps. And if that doesn't bother you, we can have, okay, whatever. I want to talk to the people that are concerned enough with humanity to say that we should not, that never again means something. And that the fact that concentration camps are now an institutionalized practice in the home of the free is extraordinarily disturbing. And we need to do something about it. This week, immigrant children were moved to the same internment camps where the Japanese were held in the earlier 20th century. And this is not even about a crisis this is not just about the immigrant communities being held in concentration camps being a crisis. This is a crisis for ourselves. This is a crisis on if America will remain America in its actual principles and values, or if we are losing to an authoritarian and fascist presidency. And so I think that is, I don't use those words lightly. I don't use those words to just throw bombs. I use that word because that is what an administration that creates concentration camps is. A presidency that creates concentration camps is fascist. And it's very difficult to say that.
All right, some comments on that. I'm not somebody who really gets especially triggered by use of the Holocaust as something, a political thing. I think it's just wrong. Whether you're talking about a lot of these Jewish groups that do use it as well, such as the ADL. But let's analyze what she's talking about instead of just feeling emotional about it. She's talking about concentration camps as far as the detainees at the southern border. But what the hell does that even mean? The concentration camps in the context of the Holocaust would be people who were gathered from across Europe, not just Jews, by the way, also a lot of, the J witnesses. You see people who are labor leaders. You see communists as well. You see gypsies were sent there. There were, at a certain point, people from some of the occupied countries of Europe, such as Italy, where the Germans occupied Italy at the end of the war, or France, were sent there as labor. So there were labor camps as well. So what was the real current in terms of these concentration camps was that the German government was trying to get a massive amount of people from one part of the world. Let's say they were living in, or part of Europe rather, living in Latvia, for example. They would ship them to another part, to Poland. So they weren't. So the migrants, it's simply not the same thing. The migrants are coming of their own volition from Honduras, from El Salvador, and from Guatemala, and coming with their, because they want to come to the United States, they arrive here. And the United States simply says, well, we're not going to have you circulating around without any permission. This is a country with borders, just like any other country with borders. And you're going to have to stay in this facility until then. And people are saying, well, there's barbed wire and there's guards or whatever. That doesn't matter. Now, she brought up the example of the Japanese internment camps. The Japanese internment camps were wrong, but it was still the same concept where the government was forcing these people to move from their homes into this detention area, into these internment camps. This is not the case here. These people are coming here and trying to get into this country. They're leaving their own homes. You're not taking them away from their home against their will. Other things observed, just a stylistic issues with the video. She said she's putting there's a t-shirt that she has. Let's just replay this for a second. You can see you have the words "rematriate the land" on her shirt. Rematriate is a play on repatriate. So she's making a feminist play on words. Very intelligent. I mean, it's kind of, she's injecting so many cc's of intersectionality into this that I think she's going to have an overdose. But repatriate the land essentially means that she doesn't believe that those parts of the country where these people are entering are even part of the U.S. They should be part of Mexico. But the fact is that Mexico even sold us part of that land in the Gadsden Purchase, which is part of Arizona and New Mexico, in I think the 1870s. So the idea of repatriating the land, or rematriating as they're talking about, which doesn't make any sense because as she knows in Spanish, repatriation comes from the word patria, which in Spanish, the word patria means country. Okay, so it has nothing to do with patriarchy or anything. Patria, there's probably the same root word, but you're going to change the entire Spanish language to accord with your feminism. Shouldn't you be respecting the culture of these Mexican immigrants and Central American immigrants that are coming here that actually speak Spanish rather than using this ridiculous feminist code? So I would say that Ocasio-Cortez's use of the Holocaust in this, the concentration camps, evoking these ideas of never again, are such logically fallacious that they make her clearly out to be one of the most dishonest and ridiculous people that you could find anywhere in politics. Putting people in detention centers because they try to get over the border. is not the same as concentrating people from other places in Europe in order to exterminate them. By the way, concentration camps were also used technically in the USSR. They were called the Gulag. There's the Lao Gai in China. Okay, these are totalitarian systems over there that are based on collectivism. And look, I don't think that people should suffer too much. But when you come to this country and you demand to be let in, that's not being put in a concentration camp when you're put into detention. I think it's just common sense. I think that these are people who just want to shoehorn the metaphor into anything they can. And there's a lot of people that are pissed off about the Simon Wiesenthal Center and a number of other Jewish groups and survivors and stuff like that. It's going to be pretty annoying for the next couple of days because of this, just like with the Ilhan Omar situation. Angela Rye also weighed in on this, almost as well, maybe even crazier. Hold on.
I am a kid who, as a point of privilege, I had a set of encyclopedias. They were orange encyclopedias that I love to read. And so I pulled the encyclopedia definition for concentration camps, and I would like to share them with the viewer. Internment center for political prisoners and members of national or minority groups who are confined for reasons of state security, exploitation, or punishment, usually by executive decree or military order. And to that end, there are concentration camps at the border. To that end, whether we call them concentration camps or we call them detention, they are problematic. To that end, when you talk about a frog being put in a boiling pot of hot water, the frog will immediately jump out. But if the frog is put in a pot of cold water and you slowly turn up the heat, I'm going somewhere, it will die. It will die. And what I'm saying to you is, today we sat through this president calling Mexicans drug dealers and rapists at the beginning of this campaign. Today, we sat through him talking about build that wall and heard all those chants. And we went from outrage, to disgust, to dismay, to it's a shame. And I am telling you that we are irresponsible at this point, that whether we call them concentration camps or not, her point remains. And the right is threatened by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she tells the truth, whether they can digest it or not. And our bottom line here is there is an inhumane crisis happening at the southern border. And it is because of how these people look. It is because of difference. It's because there is a fear that white people are losing their power in this country. That is the bottom line. It is white fear. That is what is driving this. It is racism at its core. It is what the foundation of this country is built upon. Period.
That's completely untrue. For a couple things. First of all, even
untrue.
given your
that might
definition
not
of a
be your
concentration
perspective,
camp,
but do not call what I said.
So she's basically melting before his eyes over there. You can see even her face looks like it's just been held up to a live flame. And Cortez is, it's pretty funny watching his reaction while she was speaking.
In your definition, if we were placing American citizens into these camps,
sir.
If we were placing American citizens into these camps, as we have shamefully done in the past with American citizens of Japanese descent, then I would agree with you. These are not American citizens. What the Nazis did is they took German citizens, dragged them out of their homes, stripped them of citizenship, stripped them of human dignity, and sent them to torture and death.
These people
What we have now are foreign citizens who are trespassing into the United States overwhelmingly for economic reasons, and we know that to be true historically and presently because the director of ICE just told us 90% are not showing up for their asylum hearings. They are not legitimate refugees. They're economic migrants who have decided on their own when and how they can become American citizens, and that's not the right way, and it's not about race. My father came here the legal way, and when he became an American, he didn't suddenly become white. He was still Hispanic, but he was an American citizen, and it is not racist. It is not xenophobic for this country to determine the processes to become a legal American citizen.
Let me tell you something. Now, I don't know when we decided that a humanitarian crisis could be defined whether or not someone is carrying a green card or whether or not someone has their papers. But I'm going to tell you this. Before we are American, we are human beings, and it is not okay. It is a damn shame what is happening at this border. And the fact that you're going to justify it by economics, let me just tell you, there are a whole lot of people making a whole lot of money by having these people in detention centers. We want to shift the attention attention as we should off of mass incarceration of black and brown people in this country. But now those monies are being transferred into detaining migrants at the border. It is a crisis, Steve. It is not okay just because they don't have their papers. I hope that at some point you wrestle with your conscience and get to the right side of this because, sir, you are on the wrong side of history. In 1933, there were concentration camps. In 1941, they were death camps. And that is where we are going if our consciences are not quickly pierced. It is a problem.
Let me tell you who agrees with me.
Let me tell you laugh it off.
Let me tell you who agrees with me about asylum. Barack Obama. This is what he said in 2014, and I'm quoting.
Oh, my God.
Refugee
you guys
status
are like the kings of red herrings.
So that was, again, you have people who they literally can't make the connection between, the causation and how things are generated. Okay, the migrant crisis. Most of what Steve Cortez was saying was pretty consistent with what I said, and it's consistent with history. It's consistent with what were the circumstances, and why the Japanese internment was wrong. But Angela Raya, you can see that she's basically there to bludgeon the opponent and just morally upbraid him, and that's why I think it is correct that hopefully, and I don't know if this is going to work because all sorts of things have happened, but I'm talking about the courts. But Trump has said that I guess next week ICE is going to be deporting a lot of these illegal immigrants. So once that happens, what's Angela Rye's case going to be? If you've deported these people, how can they become death camps? Or if you deport as many people as you can? Deporting people isn't the same as killing them. Deporting people isn't the same as using them as forced labor, as was done in some of these camps over in Europe or in Siberia or over in China. This is plainly one of the most ridiculous analogies I've heard. People have been imprisoned for various reasons, for both just and unjust, for all of human history. Not all of those cases were cases of concentration camps or death camps or whatever. It's one of the most. It's insane. Are there no prisons over in those countries where these people come from? Are those concentration camps? I mean, have people lost all connection to reality? Have they lost all perspective? It's really getting out of hand. And you see that there's people like Bernie Sanders who are now, he's saying that I don't accept the Trump administration's claim that Iran is behind the oil attack. So I get it. I think people have a right to be skeptical. I want to have a real full investigation into it. But this is the same Bernie Sanders who completely vouched for the intelligence community's intelligence on Russia. And I use intelligence loosely. He vouched for this notion that there was a Trump administration effort to collude with Russia. He, after he held the Helsinki conference between Trump and Putin, he went to the Senate floor and started this long, crazy rant about how national security is at stake, and John McCain had declared all this stuff and whatever. Suddenly, Bernie Sanders was using John McCain, one of the purveyors of the Iraq War, as a person to be, citing in terms of Russia. We'll listen to some of this, but it's really like you have to pick either side. Either you trust the intelligence community implicitly, like you did with Russia, or you don't trust them, like you're doing now with Iran. You can't have it both ways. I think, personally, it pays to be skeptical, but not to dismiss things out of hand. It's possible Iran did attack the tanker. That's why you need a full investigation. That's why I thought we should have had an investigation before engaging in those punitive attacks against Syria. Okay? That doesn't mean I support the Syrian government. That doesn't mean I think Syria is innocent in everything. It means that I believe in finding the facts first.
I ask you about Iran because we're seeing increasing tensions. Now 1,000 more troops deployed. Secretary Pompeo momentarily is going to be speaking from CENTCOM. Iran is now threatening to break out of the nuclear deal for the first time after complying for 14 months, according to international inspectors, even though the president withdrew from it. So we see these hits on the tankers. They say there's intelligence. At least the Brits agree with the U.S. that this was Iranian-based or Iranian-proxied. You know, there could be an accidental war. What do you do if you're the commander-in-chief, Bernie Sanders? You're President Sanders. What do you do right now where Iran is arguably acting aggressively, even if it's in reaction to the U.S. policymaking?
Well, first of all, just a couple of points, Andrea. First of all, what is absolutely necessary is an objective investigation as to these incidents. The destruction or the bombing or the attacking of oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman is not acceptable, and we need to investigate it. Second of all,
you don't accept what the Secretary, let me just ask, you don't accept the declaration from the Secretary of State?
No.
So look, I mean, he's saying in this case we need an objective investigation, which is fine. I don't have any problem with what Bernie said. But when he was approaching this issue with Trump and Russia, which I think is more important, it's more important not to get into some sort of crazy new Cold War or hot war with Russia than it is with Iran, which I think is also a problem. Bernie was all for basically treating Russia as a country that had already attacked us, despite mounds of evidence that it's been completely fabricated.
No, I don't. I mean, there needs to be an objective investigation. As you know, the Japanese in fact, the owner of the tanker that was attacked disagrees with Trump. But here's the main point that I want to make. If you look at the recent history of this country, I think we understand that the two worst foreign policy disasters were based on lies that came from the White House. You remember the so-called Gulf of Tonkin incident that led us to increase military involvement in Vietnam. And man, I could speak, that was my generation. 59,000 brave young men never came home from that war, and tens of thousands of more died, committed suicide, got into drugs when they came home. That was based on a lie. And then you look more recently at the war in Iraq, which I vigorously opposed because I did not believe Cheney, and I did not believe John Bolton, and I did not believe the Bush administration. Again, based on a lie that Saddam Hussein in Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Let me just say this. I will do everything that I personally can as a United States Senator to stop the United States attacking Iran. If we go into a war with Iran, this will be an asymmetrical war which will go on and on and on. There will be never-ending wars in the Middle East. It'll make the war in Iraq look like a cakewalk. So we have got to do everything we can to bring the antagonist, Saudi Arabia, which is a brutal dictatorship, together with Iran. Bring them together, use the power of the United States to work out a diplomatic solution, not a military solution.
So look, Bernie Sanders says a lot of proper things there. I don't want there to be a military intervention either. But, look, I'll say this. This is one area where I think he is not wrong. I think he's trying to do the thing that is right to do instead of the thing that's easy to say. A lot of people would just say, well, we're going to have to extract this pound of revenge from or pound of flesh, as they say in Shakespearean English, from Iran. No, I think he's saying the right thing. I think he's saying the right thing for the right reasons too. But you can't go and turn around at the same time and spread all this libelous crap about Putin and about Russia and about this is what we've been led to. Okay, we have to start to pursue this agenda of negotiating with the rest of the world, looking strong while negotiating with the rest of the world. And that's something he can't do. He can't look strong because Bernie Sanders is a weak person, whereas, the Trump administration tries to, affect a strong strategy. So far, it's helped with some things. So far, it's helped with North Korea. Obviously, it could be better, but that's about it in terms of that. I think that Bernie Sanders ought to really rethink his attitude towards how this this should be going. I don't think that Donald Trump wants to go to war with Iran. I think he's resisting the Boltons. He's resisting Pompeo. It's something that, they have to really understand that if America wants to avoid war with Iran, I think that these sanctions are, for one thing, succeeding, but there's going to be obstacles along the way. And eventually, I don't believe that we have to get into a war that will be a massive catastrophe like Sanders is saying, which I think he's correct about. The thing he said about asymmetrical warfare, I think, is irrelevant. Asymmetrical warfare is a made-up term of the left because, as we all know, you don't fight a war in order to be fair. It's not a ping-pong game, guys. When you fight a war, you fight to win. That's the way it is. You're not fighting a war in order to be fair. That's not how wars work. You can look at any war that's ever happened, and nobody's had that mindset, and nobody's going to start doing it tomorrow. You don't fight a war in order to see that we're playing by the same rules, and everybody is going to have fun and go out for ice cream and pancakes later. So, a couple other stories before we leave. The Oberlin incident, I think, will be the watershed for this country. That's why I think it's great that Jonathan Turley, who is a real liberal, okay, and I think that we have real liberals that are left. These people, Jonathan Turley in his case is a little bit more of a liberal to the left. I happen to be, just a liberal thinker, but it's the same idea that you don't just accept the news that's based on your agenda. Sometimes you have to admit things aren't going your way. When Mexico elected a Marxist as their president last year, I accepted it. Nothing you can do. It's not fun, but that's the way life goes. Sometimes you have to, you have to take one for the team. You have to take one for the truth. And he's saying Oberlin College case shows how universities have lost their way. And he's talking about, the shift from academics to activism. And he's saying Oberlin College in Ohio is the equivalent of the China syndrome during nuclear accidents, a point where chain reactions become impossible to stop or control. Oberlin students often find new issues to protest, even on one of the most liberal campuses in the world, like objections to serving sushi as cultural appropriation. As on other campuses across the country, these protests are encouraged by an array of faculty members and ever-accommodating administrators. So then he goes through the story of the bakery, which we've discussed on the previous stream, and which I think, it's astounding how much attention this has gotten, which is, astounding in a good way, because I think personally, as a person from Ohio, I don't live very near to Oberlin. It's kind of I would say like a 45-minute to an hour drive from where I live, but I've been there. It's an important place in this state. There's an Oberlin College in every state where you live, and the lesson that should be learned here, and this is a lesson to media, it's a lesson to academia, it's a lesson to the entertainment industry. It's that you can't just say things that are defamatory and that cast aspersions on people and show them in a negative light maliciously and expect to get away with it. That's not the way that our world works. If it's a just world, if it isn't, then I would give up hope. But this is a case where it actually gives you hope. There's the Brett Weinstein settlement that he brings up, which is an excellent example. Not quite as big of a sum, but the Evergreen State College is suffering because of that. Suffering both in terms of their reputation and suffering in terms of their finances and in terms of their enrollment. So I would say to people who are in academia, who might still be reasonable people, and I know that in many cases they might be bullied into submission at this point, but you have to figure out something at a certain point that, at some point you have to have this realization, this cloistered world where you get to say things that are not rooted in the way the rest of the world works, and you get to act a certain way regardless of the way everyone else acts, in terms of whether it's the shoplifting, which there's documented evidence that at Oberlin people do it all the time, and they say, well, it's part of the culture here or whatever. Whether it's dressing up very ridiculously in an unprofessional way and thinking, well, I'm in college. This is something that's, it's something that's an expression of my inner my inner Zen or whatever you would call it. I don't know if that's the right term. My inner, my inner character. I'm going to express it outwardly. You have these people dressing up basically like characters from the Muppets. And they think that this is going to keep going on and on and on forever. No, it's reaching a breaking point. In this case, it's a legal breaking point. But then when you start to see people, maybe you don't need a lawsuit. Maybe you just need people who aren't going to be enrolling because, once one kid, let's say you have a family with 5 kids and 2 of them have gone to college and they've completely lost their minds and they're useless people and they're sitting at home, playing on their ukulele and, I don't know, maybe at night they go out for, gelato or something, and that's about it. That's all they do all day. The next 3 kids, do you think the parents are going to invest that much in college after the way the first 2 kids turned out or whatever? People realize at a certain point that patterns of behavior don't work out and it costs them. The people who don't realize that are in for a world of pain and they'll probably end up going through severe trauma. Okay, there are people who just never learn. I'm not going to say that everybody figures it out, but at a certain point, enough people do learn, and they realize that there's no point in continuing to do this. So, yeah, I think that enrollments are going to continue to drop for some of these colleges, especially these ones that have very inflated tuition charges, and other things that are happening, including this, CNN is saying Harvard's rejection of the Parkland student made sense. So incidents like what happened with Kyle Kashuv, or I think his name is Kashuv, from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, where he was rejected. He was actually his Harvard acceptance was rescinded because of using the N-word a while back. What the hell? So this is the same thing that's happened to people. I think it was Josh Hader from the Milwaukee Brewers was also, quote unquote, exposed for using it. It says the slurs were made via text message, Skype, and in a shared Google Doc for a class study guide 2 years ago. So this is the thing. So it says let's talk about what we're talking about. The milquetoast racial slurs doesn't cut it. According to a screenshot from the Google Doc, which the HuffPost obtained access to, Kashuv repeated the N-word in all caps 11 times. And in a text obtained by HuffPost, Kashuv, speaking about a girl, appears to be complaining that she goes for N-words. In that same text, he wrote pasty Jew. So these are things that if you've been in high school, people say those things. And if you think that you're going to go to a high school and you're going to see a situation where nobody says it, if you really had access to everybody's communications, you'd probably see that in every single high school around the country, somebody says something either obscenely sexual or grossly racist about somebody or very mean. You can't police people's behavior. And this is why CNN is a failure, because they try to enforce a morality that they themselves can't live to, that they themselves know that everybody is not capable of doing. Now, there's societies where people severely restrict their own speech and try to police themselves, but that's not in keeping with this whole fake notion that CNN is pushing, that they're upholding press freedom and all of that. That's about it. I want to say thank you for those of you that watched the earlier video or the video from last night concerning the Call It stream. I thought it was a very interesting topic. Please also like, share, and subscribe. Also, subscribe to me on Minds and on BitChute, as well as Subscribestar if you want to donate. All three of those, the screen name is Chef Leopard, and on Gab, that's at Starscream85, and on Parler, that's at Razor Ray. I'll talk to you guys later, and have a great Wednesday.